All right, well, before I read scripture this evening, I want to give us all just a touch of context. Last week, we heard about King Solomon. He was the king who asked for wisdom. He was the king who ruled in Israel when Israel was strong and powerful. But as Matt told us, his legacy did not end all that well. Two of his sons fought for control, and the kingdom ends up divided into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. We don't necessarily know this yet, but this ends up spelling the doom of Israel. Tonight, we are in the northern kingdom, and I want you to remember as I read that the northern kingdom is an anxious place now. Things are not so secure as they were under Solomon. The threat of neighboring nations is very real and constant. Everyone's sort of wondering where God has gone. It's not a confident time. Tonight we will encounter a king who is wondering if God has abandoned him. We will encounter a general in need of healing. Tonight we will hear of fear and mistrust and pride and control. We will hear how those things get in the way of the human ability to see God at work in the world. Tonight we will also encounter many faithful who go unnamed and a prophet who is still working. We read from 2 Kings chapter 5. You can read along with me in your bulletin. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man and in high favor with his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. Now the Arameans on one of their raids had taken a young girl captive from the land of Israel. She served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his lord the king just what the girl from the land of Israel had said. And the king of Aram said, "Go then, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." He went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. Some of the stuff you hope to get rid of before you go on, pass away. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God, to give death or life that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Just look and see how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me." But when Elijah, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and his chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elijah sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became angry and went away, saying, "I thought that for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, and would wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" He turned and went away in a rage. But his servants approached and said to him, "Father, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? How much more when all he said was, 'Wash and be clean'?" So Naaman went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, his flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. Let us pray. Holy God, help us to hear your word for us in this ancient story. Help us to hear how you moved then and how you continue to move today. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our gathered hearts be acceptable to you, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So friends, here's the thing about the Bible. I know this very well in the UCC. If you don't read it enough, or if you read long sections of it at a time, we did that in seminary, or if you read too little at a time, it's just going to come out sounding like gibberish. That's just how it goes. All the place names are going to sound weird. We're just talking about Syria. All the people names are going to sound weird, and you're going to get hung up in all those details. Well, I guess I should speak for myself. I get hung up in all those details. You might be tempted to throw it all together. There has to be something a little fresher, a little newer to read from. But the problem is there's so much good stuff in the Bible. There's so much truth. There's so much truth about human nature. There's so much truth about God. It's truth we need to hear. It's truth that's relevant right now. And this story is such a good one. I was tempted to just read it again and let you guys think about it yourself, and I'm not going to make it any better, but unfortunately for you, I did write a sermon, so that's not what we're going to do. But what I want to think about is all the ways human nature is revealed in this story. Let's start with the king of Israel. This poor guy. He's had a heck of a time leading this country. I can just tell by his response to the letter. He rips his clothes, crying, "Am I God?" Only a man who is worried that God is no longer showing up for him asked that question. And it's understandable that he reacts that way. After all, we already know the Arameans are making a habit of raiding Israel, of kidnapping young girls and taking them off to serve their wives. It's probably not all they're doing. They are enemies, not friends. And yet, there is potential in this moment. There's potential for partnership, potential for a healing of a rift. There's potential for a response that trusts that this letter is really just a letter, not a declaration of war. I'm going to lay my cards on the table with this one because you don't necessarily have to agree with me. But I believe that when our leaders let fear govern their actions and how they govern the country, we are all in trouble.
Amen.
Fear and anxiety is something we all experience. They keep us safe, but they also blind us to possibilities sometimes. Possibility for more life, for healing, for another way beyond violence. I'm not putting down this king. He's a sympathetic figure. But if his fear had been allowed to dictate the end of the story, it would have just been another war. We would have missed the miracle of God. Luckily, that good old guy Elisha was around. Smooth, chill Elisha, not flustered by generals or kings. Gosh, why did you tear your clothes? Those were probably expensive. Just send him over to me. It's fine. Thank goodness for the voices of calm in our world, for voices of reason, for voices who see opportunity for healing. I hope you hear those voices, and I hope you hear them within you, because fear and anxiety live there, but so does that. Patience and good humor. Humor helps everything. And calmness and unflappability, that lives within you too. Next, we turn to Naaman. Have you ever met anyone like Naaman? Successful and they know it. Someone who expects to be treated a certain way. I have. I've been Naaman. I'm afraid that's the dirty little secret about preacher's kids, folks. We like feeling special and loved and important. Not all of us. Make that very clear. My brothers would disagree with me completely, but I loved the attention of growing up as a PK. I think it might be why I'm standing here in front of you, unfortunately. We think God had something to do with it too, but I liked feeling like a big deal at the church I grew up in. I liked that people knew my name, and I liked when my dad talked about me in sermons. That attention that feels so good, that kind of strokes that back. Yeah, it's clouded my judgment a time or two. And it's something I have to be very aware of. Can ask my therapist, I talk about it a lot. So, if down the road I ever end up with some big fancy job or big title, you guys are gonna have to come visit and let me know in a very kind and compassionate way if I've gotten too big for my britches. That's all of your job now. I'm gonna need you all to come out and remind me that no matter what my title says, no matter how much I think I deserve the attention I am getting, I do not dictate how or when God shows up.
Yes.
I can pray for God to show up. I can ask God to show up, but I cannot command God to show up. We don't get to do that as humans. Because that's the part where Naaman gets hung up. He's so sure that this big title of his and the things he's done means that he's going to get the fancy healing. He's going to get the prophet of God to pull out the big guns, to get some thunder and lightning, to wave his hand really big. It's going to be fancy. Instead, Elisha is at it once again, unimpressed. Go bathe in the river. Naaman thinks that the Jordan River is a dirty river. He does not want to bathe there. And so he storms off, offended and angry. And I imagine Elisha goes back to the afternoon nap that he was enjoying. Luckily for Naaman, he is surrounded by brave servants who are able to get him to reconsider Elisha's instructions. And I say lucky because that is lucky for Naaman. I really don't think God or Elisha care what happens. I really don't. If you're not there to notice when God is offering you grace, that's on us. Naaman has to get out of his own way to receive the grace of God that's right there. Human nature, pride and fear, our desire to control just how we think the world goes, just how we think God should behave, that makes it really hard for us to see God at work. Naaman and the king of Israel, they are so wrapped up in their own importance and their own fears, their own problems, that either they have stopped believing that God is working, or they are unwilling to see where God is working. The young girl captive in Aram gets it. Naaman's servants get it. Those in this story with very little power are the ones who trust that God is still present. They are the ones who actually recognize God at work. Friends, I don't think this story feels too far removed from the world that I know today. Kings and generals and politicians, they yield extraordinary power over you and me. We are affected by the decisions they make. We are affected by their mental health. We are affected by the way they choose to lead us. That's the reality we live with. But if you remember nothing else, I want you to remember this. The fear and the pride and the actions of kings will never dictate how God works in the world. The powerful will never get to determine when or how God shows up. Those in power do not decide what God is doing.
That's right.
Amen.
That's the truth about God that this text reveals. Amen.